So, in your opinion, if the Strait of Hormuz is truly blocked, what would the impact on the global economy be? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below the video so we can discuss and share perspectives. When people mention the Strait of Hormuz, they only see a small, narrow area that seems incapable of causing any major change in this vast world. But in reality, this very place could plunge the entire global economy into chaos in the blink of an eye. Imagine if one day Iran actually decides to block Hormuz. What would the result be? The consequences that we may never have thought of would occur, and the world would never be the same again. When Hormuz is blocked, not only will oil prices soar, but it will also be a blow to the stability of the entire global economic system. Oil prices will immediately rise to unprecedented levels, potentially exceeding 150 USD per barrel, the highest recorded during the global financial crisis in 2008. This will not only affect major oil-consuming countries, but will create an economic crisis, impacting every industry, every sector in society. Transportation costs, production costs, even consumer goods prices will skyrocket. This means that the cost of living for people in energy-importing countries, including Vietnam, will rise rapidly. Businesses will face the challenge of rising costs, and consumers will not be able to avoid the heavy impact as living expenses and goods prices increase sharply. In fact, small and energy-dependent countries like Vietnam will face an unprecedented challenge. When energy prices soar, the economies of these countries will be severely affected, as most production activities depend on imported energy. Transportation and raw material costs will push product prices up, making agriculture, industry, and consumption face major difficulties. This is not just an issue for large businesses, but also a burden on consumers, who will bear more pressure from these changes. But the problem does not stop at oil prices. The blocking of Hormuz will create a chain of economic impacts, preventing developed economies, which are already dependent on energy from the Middle East, from maintaining stable growth. When global oil markets are paralyzed, every country will face energy supply shortages. The supply-demand structure will be disrupted, making it impossible for these economies to continue operating as before. For developed countries, which have a high level of economic stability, they will have to accept certain difficulties. But for developing countries, this could be a massive shock. What is even more concerning is that blocking Hormuz may not only affect the economy, but also lead to a political crisis or even military conflict. Hormuz is not just an energy trade route, but it also carries deep strategic value. Major powers like the US, China, and European countries all have extremely important interests in maintaining the flow of this route. If Iran decides to block the strait, the US will not sit idly by. The Washington administration will not accept such an important trade route being cut off, and it is highly likely that the US will have to take military action to protect its interests in the region. The involvement of countries outside the region, such as China and Russia, will also create an extremely complex situation. China, with its massive energy needs and being a strategic partner of Iran, may not directly intervene militarily, but it will seek to exploit the crisis to expand its influence. Russia, facing sanctions from the West, may support Iran to divert the attention of Western powers. This will lead to an indirect military confrontation, where the major powers will be unable to avoid involvement in the war. Despite the analysis and responses from major countries, a global energy crisis caused by the blockage of Hormuz will create profound changes in the operation of economies. When energy supply is blocked, every industry will be affected, from production and transportation to services. People will face rising prices, and the middle class will be the most disadvantaged in this crisis. Not only that, the increase in energy costs will also push countries into a spiral of inflation, creating huge pressure on central banks, which are already facing loose monetary policies. This could force countries to return to tight monetary policies, further burdening the global economy. And if Hormuz is truly blocked, the consequences will not just stop at economic and political impacts. It will also be a sudden shock, creating an unpredictable change in the global energy structure. Countries dependent on energy from the Middle East will no longer be able to maintain stability, and a chain reaction will occur, causing all countries around the world to be affected. So the question is, can a solution be found for this crisis? Can the stability of the global economy and world peace be protected? Or will everything fall into chaos? And if one day Hormuz is blocked, will we have the ability to cope with the consequences? Let's wait for the answer, because everything could change in just one decision from Tehran. These developments not only affect countries in the Middle East, but are a matter for the entire world. When Hormuz plays a crucial role in the global economy, a wrong decision from any party could create an unpredictable crisis. Today, we will explore a story that could change the entire world, a story from a narrow strait but with tremendous power, enough to shake the global economy. Have you ever wondered how an area just over 30 kilometers wide can hold the fate of more than 30% of the world's oil transported by sea? Yes, we are talking about the Strait of Hormuz, a strategic choke point, which, if blocked one day, everything we know about the world economy could collapse in an instant. Hormuz is not just an ordinary sea route, it is the lifeblood of energy for the entire world. Every day, millions of barrels of oil from major oil-producing countries such as Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iraq, and Kuwait pass through here to reach consumer markets in Asia, Europe, and the US. But why does such a narrow strait have such great influence? The answer is simple, yet it hides a much deeper truth. Because Hormuz is the only route that can transport oil from the Gulf countries. Without it, alternative routes cannot meet the huge demand of the world. But what makes Hormuz a strategic weapon in Iran's hands is its very strategic location. From the outside, Hormuz is just a narrow sea route, but for Iran, it is the trump card in every negotiation. For decades, when facing sanctions, when being cornered by the West, Iran has not hesitated to warn that it could block Hormuz, making the whole world stop and think again. This is not an empty threat. Every time Iran issues this warning, the global oil market trembles, oil prices spike, and every country from large economies like the US and the EU to small countries like Vietnam must face the energy price storm. So how can a small country like Iran control such an important strait? The answer lies in the very monopoly of Hormuz in transporting global energy. While countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE may expand their oil pipelines, their total capacity still cannot replace Hormuz. This means that if Iran decides to block the strait, no alternative solution can meet the market's demand. Countries that depend on energy from Hormuz will be left in a passive position, and the global economy could face an unprecedented energy crisis. Not only that, Hormuz also holds a highly important strategic value in the current geopolitical context. Throughout history, Iran has known how to exploit this advantage to negotiate with the West. Whenever Iran is in a difficult situation, it uses Hormuz as a political weapon to exert pressure. Therefore, Hormuz is not just a trade route, but it has become a powerful card in oil, energy, and even political negotiations. But what would happen if one day Iran decides to block Hormuz? This change would not only affect countries directly involved in oil transportation, but would trigger a global chain reaction. Oil importing countries like the US, EU, or other major economies would face an oil price storm, causing gasoline, transportation, production, and consumption costs to soar. Countries like Vietnam, with a developing economy and dependence on imported energy, will be directly and severely affected by this decision. The big question here is, can the world withstand such an energy crisis? When global oil markets are paralyzed, when countries face soaring energy costs, everything we know about economic stability will be overturned. These consequences will not only affect the economy, but also plunge the world into instability, creating ripple effects to small economies, causing every sector, from industry to agriculture, to suffer heavily. And what is even more terrifying is that a global energy crisis could lead to military conflict, especially when control over Hormuz is a matter of life and death for major countries. The US, with its strong military presence in the Gulf, will certainly not let Iran freely block such an important route without responding. And if a military conflict breaks out, not only Iran and the US, but also other powers will be drawn into an indirect war with unpredictable consequences. Hormuz, a small route, only about 30 kilometers wide, yet holds within it the power to change the global political and economic landscape. Its monopoly makes Iran a force whose influence cannot be underestimated. And if that day comes, if Hormuz is truly blocked, the world will not only face an energy crisis, but also a dangerous political and military confrontation, which could change everything we know about the current world order. So, what is the question? Can we find a solution to this crisis? Can the stability of the global economy and world peace be protected? Or will everything fall into chaos? We will continue to follow and await the answer together, because the price to pay could be too great for all of us. Do you know that a narrow strait of just 30 kilometers can plunge the entire world into chaos overnight? The Strait of Hormuz, the global energy lifeline, can change everything, and if Iran closes it, we will all pay the price. Let's explore the shocking truth right now.